Thank you for joining us on our Made Local series to hear from acclaimed poet S. Brook Corfman and their distinctive and artful volume, My Daily Actions or the Meteorites, published by Fordham University Press. Hello, I'm Stephanie Flom, Executive Director of Pittsburgh Arts and Lectures. Welcome. Made Local is presented in partnership with the Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh. Thank you to the library and to Fordham University Press and the University of Pittsburgh's Dietrich School of Arts and Sciences. Thanks to White World Bookstore, where you can purchase signed copies. Sam will read poems and then be joined in conversation with award-winning poet Katie Willingham. S. Brook Corfman is the author of multiple volumes, including Luxury Blue Lace, Autumn House Press, Frames, Belladonna, Meteorites, Double Cross Press, and The Anima, 4 Closet Dramas, Goss PDF. They are the poetry editor at Pinwheel and the recipient of grants and fellowships from Lambda Literary Arts, the Vermont Studio, and the Greater Pittsburgh Arts Council. Their work has appeared in the Academy of American Poets Poem a Day, the Brooklyn Rail, Conjunctions, and Diagram. They're also a PhD candidate in Critical and Cultural Studies at the University of Pittsburgh. Their peer-reviewed work appears in TSQ, Transgender Studies Quarterly. My Daily Actions or the Meteorites was named one of New York Times' best poetry books of 2020. In the book's foreword, Kathy Park Hong, the judge of Fordham's Poetry Prize, expounds. Corfman writes mesmerizing sentences that stand on their own, like messages in a bottle washed up from our ever-expanding sea. The collection works as a conceit of diary entries, but there's nothing hasty or random in Corfman's prose poems, which all seem considered with such painstaking care that I want to read them again and again. Please welcome S. Brook Corfman.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And thank you to everyone at the Pittsburgh Arts and Lectures for supporting this. I wrote this book in Pittsburgh, beginning to end, and I once tried to work on it in a residency in upstate New York, and was completely prevented from doing so. So I'm really excited to be here and to read a little from my book and then share it with the series. Also, the generosity of the time that Pittsburgh Arts and Lectures offers means that I get to kind of talk about the scope of the whole book and read through the book in a way that when I'm only reading 10 or 15 minutes, I don't really get to do. So for me, that's really exciting also to get to kind of give the whole journey of it. The book is called My Daily Actions or the Meteorites. It's mostly a book of prose poems. Although the unit is really the sentence more than it is the prose block, even though the most common form is the prose poem. I'm gonna read and then I'll talk a little bit more. I'm gonna read the first poem. There are 2 epigraphs before the first poem. One from Kafka, all things possible do happen, only what happens is possible. And the other one is from Edel Adnan, matter is desperate. The Kafka epigraph comes by way of Susan Sontag in her journals, published journals, which after the book was printed, I realized I never followed up to make sure that she was right, but nobody's complained yet. Okay, premonition. In the field, hands rise like wildflowers, each nail painted a bright color, teal, sunflower, tangerine, lapis. From your vessel, dip the paddle to the dirt. It moves as water, a reversed river. A single door, ornate, leads only to the rest of the meadow. When I am alone, I sometimes stand like the women of those worlds which are my own sacred texts. I hold a scepter shaped like a key, turn from the Torah toward a magical girl. A beautiful form appears with a warning. The valley will burn or the sky will firm as weight. These are not inevitable, but I react to specific demands. For example, let time move forward. never go through the door. So I wait and watch what moves in the meadow. Each step toward or away from the door becomes impossibly detailed. So I actually wrote that poem after most of the poems in the book, and I don't remember writing it. I know when I wrote it from my computer's documentation of it, but I don't remember writing it. But I do remember after it was written being like, oh, that's the first poem of the book. The other thing about that poem is that it starts this sentence with so I wait and watch what moves in the meadow. And my first poetry teacher was Claudia Rankin, and she had given us this kind of axiom that I don't think she believes in really anymore, but that she said, never start a line with so. And I, as a young poet, kind of internalized it. I was like, okay, I will never do that. And then when I read that poem and I wrote that line, I said, oh, I'm leaving it in, which means I guess I must feel pretty good about my career as an artist to do that. The reason that I liked that poem as the first poem in the book is that last line, though, each step toward or away from the door becomes impossibly detailed. And because it sets up, I think, the rush of sensation that the book tries to think about. Sometimes when people read the book, they tell me they don't know what it means, but they know how it made them feel. And that is 100% okay with me. So if you want to just turn the screen off, go wander around your apartment and listen to me as I'm reading and feel rather than processing. And that's a totally wonderful way to experience the book, I think. So I'm going to read a little bit from the first section of prose poems, which is called Meteor. And the Meteor and the section later in the book called Cold Meteor have what's my favorite effect of when you flip through a book, which is the kind of facing page prose block. There's something very satisfying to me about the kind of grid that's created when there's that block of text in the middle, and you have to kind of enter each poem each time. So this is the first one from Meteor. If I focus on the window, the trees move me south. Birch, acacia, willow, oak, these are not their names. One question is about how much can be willed into the world, whether this is a form of activism or a deadly distraction. Similarly, an electronic bird gathers data about rainforest animals far from my own as the study population slowly diminishes. That is, I recently imagined living for 900 years. So much cruelty. When even 10 years ago, I could barely imagine crossing 20. Autocorrect. Bare image. I create in my mind each next square, but it is so much effort. The glass darkens with it. Dog using his tail as a brush, erasing the path. That's Wonderland. That's right now. I wished to become a starfish collecting human hair softly in the ocean, beautiful in my slow accumulation of toxins. Take them in, they lull me irregularly to sleep. When I was writing the prose poems of this, I wrote them all at once. Well, I wrote the first draft of them kind of all at once in this kind of daily writing practice. And so one of the things that happened is that many things that were happening in my life that had specific details, like I was rewatching Sailor Moon, or I watched Alice in Wonderland also, so that dog erasing the path with his tail, that's from that moment at the end of Alice in Wonderland, the Disney movie, when she's on the path and she kind of gets left on this square. And so hopefully I'll kind of, as I'm reading, point out some of them. But the idea, right, this is part of the feelingness of the book, is that even if you don't know the specific reference, you can get something just about that capsule of the image. That capsule of the image is more important than kind of the specific reference in this book for me. That's not true of all poems, but for now. Okay, so I'm going to read a couple more of the prose poems, and I'm not going to take a break for just a couple of them first. It is as if a meteor is imminent. It is as if to walk out of a house in a pair of heels would make me someone's hero and also get me killed. It's as if this is not statistically unlikely for me. It's as if, what was the word the therapist used? My sense of self was annihilated as a child. As if I do not hold tension, but work very hard to be tired or tense from other activities. As if I ever captured a spider instead of killing it. Sometimes the window slips down. It has nothing to do with circadian rhythm. It is as if I stayed up all night because I could pretend no one would call upon me. Sometimes I feel betrayed by the early morning birds, whatever kind live in Western Pennsylvania. I wanted everything to be asleep and to leave me alone, to stop talking to each other in ways I could not understand. And then I took to myself with such precise penance. I am surprised by my vision of disaster. I always thought I would prefer water. Fountain of youth overflowing until I drown. Swimming, a skill I do have, until I am filled with acid and sink, a stone. Gabby wrote how easy it was to become a stone, and it is not the same for me. I wish I could forget. And should I die tomorrow? I am instead a burning sphere moving through space. That is, I am a sphere moving through space and burn only when I get close to another mass. In a Sailor Moon movie, which I own on VHS, although I don't myself own a VCR player, silver rays give way to a pink bubble that converts the meteor, comfortably holding 6, into a spaceship. We can all breathe. Even if Tuxedo Mask kissed me back to life, all Endymion, I think I would stay dead and be grateful to have gone out that way. Let me say this one thing, that the meteor is a woman of varying biologies and the crocuses are rising up. In only 3 words, I can convey a schism, X, Y, Z. Insert here for pleasure. The increasing question of if anything is scientific. We have sensations unreliably programmed. The wall's texture is uncomfortable. That is, the fan moves air into and out of a white room where otherwise it stultifies. The shadow of a hair as it grows longer unfurls into the leg of a praying mantis. No one sleeps, and we are already dead. We are accepting this, or I am trying to do so without giving up. If the prism scatters, still we hold each color together until we reach a new surface. There are no excuses. A book I read telegraphs the truth of an experience, or one truth, in a real kind of realism, like perfumed hair. A speculative moth under the moon. A speculative tulip bulb which grows into other kinds of bulbs. Edison's, scientists. Multi-purpose latex has been engineered to grant you vision in the dark, even if you did not have vision in the light. I am happy for this vision of a life, but wish for a transformation instead. I have never read a book that mirrored my gender, and like books anyway. Is it unnecessary then, or is there an absence that, if filled, would fled? Again, I understand calm as an absence. I understand repression as an absence still filling the lungs with water. I have not become a lion, a wolf, not even a lizard. I have become ineffective. I have been ineffective, but maybe also become. I wanted to be a starfish, hurtling through a void. All that's left is detritus fused together like the island of trash in the Pacific. Like that island, these two retain importance. I just can't figure out how to tell you. Importance can take us in many directions. What if I said I came from the future and the world had ended, and it was important to write down how your mind collided with itself? What if I said I grayed up below the surface, woke only to see the fire cross the fire break? I am not describing my day well, but I'm not trying to describe it either. I am trying to describe it. I am not describing my day well, but I'm not trying to escape it either. There's a couple more from this that I want to read, but I just want to point in here to say one of the things I was really worried about as I was finishing this book was this question about the meteor and the meteorites and the metaphor, because I think it risks the book seeming like it's set in space or something, that it has a real astronomical or astrological interest. It has more of an astrological interest. But when I did a visit with a class that read a college class, and one of the students said to me, no, the meteor works because the meteor comes towards Earth, like it enters Earth. And I really loved that. I hadn't quite named that until this student offered it to me as kind of the directionality of the meteor is that something from space comes to Earth. It's not set out there. And so the kind of stuff around the meteor in the book is the stuff around me on Earth. Have you forgotten about my body, its particulars? The implication here is that I did somehow successfully, and then I didn't sleep well and my eyes felt more particular while everything else blurred. The window clicks shut. I do this as a routine. When we don't lock it, the top falls down like a blouse and spiders get in that easily. I feel little remorse, but wonder. I still could not take it lightly that people made love without me. I misremember that quote. A hanger falls from the chandelier like a raven. Sulfur. I turned my attitude up to confuse you, and it worked. I am here, and here is the sand I removed to make a space. It is as if tired is no longer a response, a physicality that occurs as the result of something, but instead a preemptive, autocorrect, preemotive mentality to being called upon. The theorists call this being hailed. I call it receiving an email between 3 and 9 p.m. And then the phone rang in 10-minute intervals, and it was revealed the great fact that would fill the day. A woman died. A woman died, and we cannot even agree she was a woman. A woman died in horrible ways, and the statistics didn't change, but I felt their failure more clearly. Only the boyfriend checked on me. I cannot tell if this is because only the boyfriend knows. It is hard to talk about it, and yet I have filled a notebook. So that was the first, for a long time, that was its own independent section. It was a chapbook, a letterpress chapbook. And so one of the things that happened is that it existed in this chapbook, that section that I just read from. And then I had to think about how to make it work as a book where something happened after, right? So this ending of the chapbook, and then something had to happen after. And there were more prose poems, which I'll read a couple of in a second. But one thing that happened is that I wrote this new poem for the middle of the book called Apparent Corona, which I wrote before coronavirus. I wrote it after reading Myung-Mi Kim's 1999 book, Dura, which I think gives you some sense of the scope of that metaphor in 1999. I wrote that poem in 2018 that I'm about to read. And so much of the book is interested kind of in premonition and in what poems know before we do. And so there's a way in which this poem, which you'll hear, has a question about contagion and the enclosure of social media and of ourselves in physical spaces came to really resonate for me in a kind of spooky way. There's a little bit of a different form. The sentences are shorter, and it's a little bit longer of an individual section. Apparent Corona. First name, harm. First name, last name, death. Flowers are beautiful. This is heavy. Someone else will drink the wine. First name, last name, prize. Snow falls as rain. Mucus accumulates. A plan 1 year in advance. Feeling of belonging to the imminent past. Sphere blue with futility. Face ruptures. Stress thump, strange fullness. The heat turns on. White footpath, diamond circle, brain and skull, vanishing steps. There is no obvious correlation to the poem. Bloomed skin, red rash, analergic, illicit profusion. Each chapped lip takes in dust. I have to emerge into the world. Small series of replacements, quotidian effect of pain. I wake up tired, the failure lain down to sleep. I throw what little energy I have left at the wall. The scars in continual rupture, open mouth, lip and white head, the human skin regenerating cleanly. The scar erodes. How is it a virus is not contagious? Little bloom, little archipelago under the skin. I Google thrush, I Google anxious death. I seem to be truly changing. It is not twilight. Other names are fear or grief. To move on and through a feeling, the feeling must be honored. Some encounters could have been avoided. A scream. The screen shakes. I am not crying. I want this blurred hour to continue. New room. I felt as if a stranger walked through the wall. The heart rate settles. The heart rate rises. A time span holds sadness. A shape like a holster. So then the second big section of the book, so there's kind of that first poem I read, a section of prose poems, that middle poem that I just read, and then another section of prose poems before it ends. And so that second section is a kind of refraction in some ways. It's less, its narrative concerns are sometimes less clear. But I'll read the poem. It's called Cold Meteor, and as I go through, I'll read the poem that Cold Meteor comes from, which might give you some sense of the relationship between the two. It has a kind of more dramatic, but also collage-like imagery, I think. Maybe Kathy will have something to say differently. The eye is greedy, a faint glow at the edge of a bed. It is rising like the night sky. It cannot cease. When I removed my mask, nothing looked like I'd been to the club. When I removed my mask, I knew time was up, at least for me. Impossible venture until it happens. The balloon inflates into a meteor. California slides partially into the ocean. I wished for overlapping circles as representations of the parts of my life. I wished for an avatar to move through the world however I wished it to. It may have been granted in some small part. It fell upon him, will fall. I blamed my curtains for my insomnia, but then the fan on the ceiling shook itself loose, popped the window open, and rain flooded in. A daffodil I seem to have dropped on my way home. How intensity fades or collects on a spinning blade. I was in an orchard. My hair grew behind me like the tail of some fast sphere. A worst fear, cauliflower ear. I can't hear about the vegetable without thinking of the football players. The only feeling to which I have a corresponding acute physical sensation is disgust, the shudder of cottonmouth it tries to disperse. Or this fear of pain and that it might happen to me. Why is it a yelled name from a stranger is hurtful? Consider annihilation in small doses, how it can be accomplished by anyone. I'm still afraid of the bakery cashier, and it's been 5 years. Say you don't look pink. Say pink is not the color. It's difficult to detach pink from inherent value. See the heat-soaked cobblestones. Even at night, there's no relief. Pink floods the inside of the eyelid. A confession of my inadequacy. There is something I love, I want to replicate, but I fear I am succeeding. Circumscribed time balloons. As a car moves through it, the fog condenses to rain. That is the self in the thin statue at the entryway of bronzed copper. The sled as red metal in the snow. Again, for hours along a highway, up against a truck in brighter clouds and then encroaching frost. A feeling is different each time, but that does not mean it is absent of form. I wrote most of these poems on my phone. It occurs to me that this is a good time to say that. And I did this thing where I read books of prose poems that I really loved, which were by Don Lundy Martin, Elizabeth Willis, Marissa DiGiorgio in Adam Gianelli's translation, and Meme Bersenbrugger, whose poems look a little different, but they still counted. And then every time something like sparked, I got my phone out and I started writing off of that. And so that a confession of my inadequacy line from the last poem, there's something I love, I want to replicate, but I fear I am succeeding, comes out of that process of this feeling of like, oh, I'm trying to write this poem that feels like me, that's inspired by these poems that I love. And I was really worried about that for a long time, if I was like somehow plagiarizing them. But that's part of the trick of the prose poem, is that because they all look the same, it becomes harder to tell like what one is or is not like another one, which is also kind of the wonder of the poem. There's a lens in my eye, and in one film, an extra lens tipped off an assassin. At this point, almost anything could be a fairy tale. The robot and the alien escape to elaborate asteroid rings. Photos of the planet do not reveal them. The streaked sky means it's been well used since I was a child. I used to sit at the edge of the lake as waves came in and try to predict precisely the path they would leave on the sand, their exact contour. I almost said it was more interesting than lines, but I'm interested in those too, how I could never achieve the precision my high school art teacher wanted from me. I've embraced it like an elegant glove, smudged with the ink from the drawing. W stands for whitewater, as in how what was once clear is named. The invention of butter for many purposes, not all of them demure. If I tell you I read the tarot, and in it I saw a rock hurtling through space, propelled by an initial force. If the brontosaurus, like today's elephant, mourned, even for other species dead, better than us. Thinks we're cute, too, in the same part of the brain. An altered evolution, like a cuffed rose. I laid down in the bed and didn't rise for several hours. I wore an emerald dress. It had a low back. The shape of a feathered wing as a knife coming together in the library. Then, inexplicably, a slow film and a blue one. Much of the book is interested, as you may be gathering, in the problem of like details and specifics, that we can talk in abstractions or in generalizations, but like ultimately we sort of have to live out our life with the specifics and with the specific things at hand, which I think about just that emerald dress with the low back in that poem is the green dress Keira Knightley wears in the movie Atonement, which is not really a dramatic dress, or it doesn't seem, it's not fancy in a particular way. It doesn't have a lot of extra stuff on it. But there's something about that dress that like captured a generation of us watching it, just as kind of a certain image because of the color. I'm not seeing, that's, maybe not the most important reference of all of these in the book, but it's something that I think about a lot of the time. Okay, so this is the last two, the one that has the cold meteor in it. On a scream, a naked form flew, feral feeling, but no just cause. A search party wove its way into the loom. We clothed her, the voice. It was not clear what fabric would do other than warm. Once I become aware of an alternative, it is difficult to continue on. Do not say it, it's coming, I know it, but I'm hoping you won't. The fan fell from the window again. That's how she got out. I'm a speculative mind. You were below sea level. A meteor, too, hung in the sky, coming closer. When the impression of a dinosaur's skin was discovered in the sand, I briefly believed in science. It was so close to the illustrations I had seen. On the meteor, everything happening here happens also. No, nothing's different. A comet is cold, like a mirror in the forest. One thing that I'm learning as I read through the poems that I picked that I felt like might create an arc is that I picked a lot of the poems that have the same images in them, which in the book, those images repeat too, but they're a little bit closer together as I'm reading them. So if you're like, why do you keep writing about dinosaurs? I think those are the only two references to dinosaurs. They just happen to be in these poems, although I may keep writing about dinosaurs. Okay, so this is the last kind of like prose poem block of the book. The deer as an omen, ghosts stop silently in the city's road, unconcerned. They amble off, but they've rattled me. I, the death wail of each passing car. I, a late night, but still somehow bright sky. When I looked through the window from outside, I brought down a spider web. When I opened the door, I had my phone to my ear, still locked, to show whatever was coming from the other side that I was not alone. So the last poem in the book, and then I'll be done, is the only poem in the book that has kind of like a line break in it, which you won't quite hear in quite the same way when I'm reading it. But you can see if you read the book. It's also called Premonition, like the first poem of the book. And I wrote it after, I wrote all these poems that had the metaphor of the meteor, and then I saw an actual meteor shower. And so I wrote this kind of windy poem that ends us up there, where I actually see the meteor. So, Premonition. I put on a coat made of paper where fear lines each side. To restore old books, the paper can be split in half and reattached with a new archival center to preserve it. I don't know what can be done with circuits and wires, but imagine edges meeting just beyond my finger. I painted my nails. That's why I chose this nexus. This doesn't mean anything as a theory of gender. I am training my left hand to be as adept as my right. I cannot decide if I am larger than my skin. The most expensive thing I ever touched was a book, and somehow I was not afraid I would ruin it. That's true. As soon as I say, no one has mentioned this color, a woman comments on it. It makes me miss my friend, the geologist, whose favorite color is teal. Is it clear to you that as soon is actually indicative of a 24-hour period, give or take a few hours? That the woman holds a staff shaped like a key, and neither of us knows what kind of lock such a key opens. The poet is in my ear. Take notes, notes, yes, notes. That poet is C.A. Conrad. As soon as I got back from the sequoias, I put the smoky quartz in a box and the polish back on my fingers. metallic sheen. I prayed at each ancient, each ossified corpse for a little more magic than I had in my life. When I held out my hand to the phone, it did not fly across the room to me. The truth, I was disappointed. I am softening myself, and I cannot seem to distinguish this from becoming more like a child. What if hysteria is a heuristic we can use to predict the future? Not Freud. Picture Cassandra screaming unheeded, or better yet, a pop star, quote, in hysterics after bombing, as the internet tells me when I Google famous hysterics. As if these women had been recorded as individuals. These many-gendered women I feel so tender toward. When such a feeling is a bomb or a bullet crossing the gap. But what is the gap? I am afraid to go to the store alone. Each place I told a lie in, I can see clearly, as I can see my father in the chair in the middle of the room, saying, no, I don't think it's a good idea, even though that chair was against the wall and I was on the stairs. My father must have said more than that. Yes, we were talking about nail polish and what was coming towards me. The man I was sure was going to launch himself across the food court. The strange space where the fear may be justified, but until it happens, it seems there's nothing to be done. What color does the sky change when a bad thing is on the horizon, but it's not a storm or a tornado? That's the color of the interval between me and the man's possible violence. I regret not submerging myself in the very cold water called Mirror Lake. I have always wanted to go through a mirror. I add this to my list. The list is longer than I remember it. There is one day that is cool, and this reprieve makes every hot day after it seem impossible to stand. And then I saw a meteor, and then two, real ones, in the sky. A meteor is only the action, the burning up. And the thing about them is, unless you're lucky, you only see them out of the corner of your eye. So you, like the meteor, are moving to a point of absence, just the night. Thank you all so much. I'm excited to have a bit of a discussion about the book further and say a bit more. And I hope you had a wonderful time listening as I did, getting to read such an extended excerpt. Thanks.
So thank you so much for your reading. It was really beautiful, and I'm glad we get to talk a little more about this book. I wanted to ask you to start by explaining something you were mentioning early on about the sentence versus the prose block, and saying that the sentence is really the unit that you were thinking about in this book. I don't know if you can speak more about whether that's true in all of your work, or whether that's especially true in this book and with prose, and talk about the distinction between those.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for being here, Katie, and for that question. Katie is one of the best question askers that I know about poetry, and has an investment, like I do, in the poem kind of as a genre itself. So I think this will be, as evidenced already by this question, a great conversation. The sentence, that's whether I thought about the sentence as the unit at the time, or thought about it later, I think I sort of came to understand it as the unit of the book later. So it was less while I was writing, and more later when I was trying to think about it, that I was like, oh, actually the relationship between the sentences in the book is like pretty weird. Like it's not always a kind of logical this then that happens kind of progression of the sentence. And so partially that's because in the prose poem, you have a kind of narrative propulsion that's different from a lineated poem. Like there's kind of, it keeps going. And so you don't need the same logical maybe connection between the two sentences, because there's already this kind of forward force. But I always, what I love about a lineated poem, which is, now I'm trying to think more about the individual poem in my newer work, is the tension between like the line break fragment and like the sentence. So it's still, the sentence is still kind of the organizing unit, and like, what do you do with the sentence? In part because I think of the sentence as a pretty flexible container, that the sentence is just the thing that's bounded by like maybe a capital letter and a punctuation mark. So not necessarily like a normatively grammatical sentence, but just kind of flexible container that can like move around and be put next to other containers and in different combinations. So by unit, right, I'm still thinking about the paragraph or the prose poem, but unit is like the thing that makes it up, right? And that you can kind of recombine and think about how they fit together. It can be kind of like a puzzle. Yeah, I think I find that kind of constraint very generative. I'm not generally like I don't write with a lot of kind of received forms or like very particular constraints, but having a little bit of something to be like, okay, you have to write a sentence and then you're writing another sentence and then we're kind of manipulating with that. I find that very helpful as something to push against when I'm writing.
This is a little bit of a follow-up to that, just because I was, taking some notes while you were speaking about logic and thinking about how sentences produce or don't produce a logic. And I'm wondering if you also mentioned dream logic. And I'm wondering if you might speak a little bit about whether you think about, you also mentioned earlier on about thinking and feeling, and kind of that these poems have sort of an atmosphere and a feeling. And I think that was such a beautiful way to describe the way to experience this book. It was really lovely advice for the reading, actually. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about whether you think about this particular project as being against logic in a way, or just having its own sort of different or alternate logic.
So I think the book has a real problem with logic. In that logic sort of crumples under anxiety and fear, or logic is not like comforting when faced with a certain kind of anxiety or fear. In the book, but also I think in general, that like, sometimes a helpful thing when one is anxious is to be like, okay, this will or will not happen to me. But a lot of times if the anxiety isn't produced by a kind of logical question, you can't really answer it by saying like, I know this will happen or not to me. This is a problem I have with horror movies a lot, that I am not scared by horror movies that have logic really to them, or if there's like a metaphor or something to it, I'm like, that's fine. And as soon as the horror movie is like unexplained in a particular way, I'm like up all night and I'm like, oh my God, it's coming for me. Even though it's, not, because it's not real. And so that the book has a kind of, the logic of the book is really about trying to think about this kind of fear or this anxiety, and then like, if we know certain things are logical in the face of that, like, do they persist? Do they fall away? Like, how do things come together differently under that kind of atmosphere? Or in the broadest scale, right, the kind of biggest fear or anxiety in the book is climate change, and this kind of sense of really immediate environmental disaster, which is logical in that we know, we have evidence of it and we sort of know how it will work, but it's also, it turns out pretty hard to predict, like in the nitty gritty. Like we have this kind of big scale sense of it changing, but like, it's my understanding is that it's like pretty hard to say like when the hurricane will come, right? Or like how we can't actually predict like how the fire season in California will go. We can sort of predict now that it will be intense and bad, but it's like, the ways in it's hard to prepare in the kinds of logical place that we've had, other than at the bigger scale, which is like trying to stop the whole thing, right? You can't kind of respond on the immediate level. So yeah, so maybe I'll stop there. Maybe I'm kind of rambling now, but right. But so there is this kind of question about logic and how it crumples. And so I don't know if it's trying to find a new logic or if it's just kind of tracing, patterns of logic or patterns of sense making in the face of these kinds of different anxieties.
I love that. I think that we got a lot deeper on that difference between thinking and feeling, or how they overlap and are entwined and collapse or infuse each other in different ways. I wanted to talk about the meteor. You were talking about also coming to like a different understanding of the meteor.
Mhm.
And I wanted to, since you struggled with holding up your own copy
Oh
of
yeah, but now I
Meteorites, I
can. I
brought
got it
it
out.
so that, so that I could show it off. And it's interesting we're talking about the elements of global warming as well, because something I think about so much in your work and even in this book and the sections that you read from it are all of the interior spaces. We're often kind of
Mm.
like at a window, looking out, and there's very much like an eerie domesticity to different parts of the book, and I'm thinking about that in relation to the meteor and the directionality, right? Things coming in and global warming
Mhm.
coming towards you, and but you're inside, but it's not a that doesn't make it a safe space.
Mm.
And yeah, I wondered if you could talk about uh, occupying those spaces and occupying those spaces in your poems.
Mm. Um, yeah, Katie gave me my favorite description of my first book, which is similar to this, which is that my first book before this felt like a haunted house, but nothing ever jumps out at you. So I love this follow-up question about the meteorites. Um, you know, I this is a good question because I'm realizing that I don't know that I have a good answer. Part of it is just that spaces are shapes. And one thing that I'm interested in is like abstraction and like and that shows up in the book on and off a lot, about like how personal or how emotionally invested an abstraction can feel, like what we think of as abstraction. I mean, this is like the project of many a visual artist, but part of that is that if I'm in a room, if I'm inside, then I'm literally in a geometric shape that's like structuring my experience. And that's been really true in Pittsburgh because I live in a apartment that has this turret room. That's where I'm in right now. So it's this round room, which means that I'm always kind of thinking about the shape of my apartment in a particular way because there's like literally different shapes in different parts of my apartment. Um, uh, and also I live now on the first floor. And when I first moved to Pittsburgh, I lived kind of on the third floor, the second floor, and I wrote this book. I think it wasn't the first year I lived on the first floor, but it was still when I was getting used to the sense of literal spatial permeability, that I could hear a bit more about what was happening outside when someone was walking by than you can kind of on the third floor, or it feels closer, even if you could still hear it. Um, and so and also because I think as a graduate student and as a teacher of college level writing, because I'm not in an office, frequently, or sometimes I'm, but it's not sort of the structure of my day. The domestic space holds a lot of different stuff, and so this is true, in other poems which are about like sort of my childhood. That like the domestic space holds many different kinds of things. But it was true in this too, that I was experiencing this kind of multiplicity of feelings about being at home. It wasn't as simple as like I'm at home and I'm have this kind of singular vision of how that feels or how that works, but it was really a sense of feeling connected and feeling right. This apartment has big windows, and so a lot of times staring out the window and thinking about kind of this weird relationship that the window creates between inside and outside. Um, and the thing coming towards you. um I mean, right, one of the related questions to that about the thing coming towards you is like, this is maybe less explicitly in the book, but is this question about like ownership, which is like I rent. And I think that I don't know what it would feel like to own property, but like that's a kind of different experience maybe, whether or not it's true, but that like this feeling of not just like your landlord, but like this feeling of not of sort of being permeable, right? That like your space, and your location, Also, my apartment is on the line of a kind of gentrifying neighborhood in Pittsburgh that has changed a lot since I first moved here. And so this real sense of movement and change, even as kind of the space, the kind of abstraction, the shape of the space stays the same.
I don't know if it would have been my first instinct to, address global warming in such an intimate way. But I love that so much, and this idea of permeability and, how abstraction gets to us, how it gets inside. And also thinking about, transience and like our own transience and how we think about that in relation to these bigger things and things at scale.
I don't know that it would have been my, before this book, first inclination to think about global warming that way either. Part of that happened because it snuck into the book in a particular way. It turned out that was something that I was thinking a lot about. And so it just kind of showed up. There's that like poetry adage that like whatever you write, the thing you're obsessed with will like show up in. And so that, so that kind of snuck its way in that way and became a big part.
The anxieties in it too, right? It's they're bigger than the self, even though they're, constructed by the self. I feel like that speaks back to kind of the logic we were talking about before also. Yeah. I want to take us a different direction and think about, you were talking about writing on your phone. And I'm wondering if that was a new experience for you with this and had to do with, what was going on in your life then that was making writing accessible in that way, or whether it was, again, a constraint, a practice that allowed for a certain kind of constraint, or what that was like for you.
Yeah, I had never written really on my phone before. I had mostly written in these kinds of laborious longhand notebooks that then got transcribed onto the computer, and a lot of form taking happened in that moment of transcription of when it became kind of like a Word document, and then I could type it up and move it around. And part of what happened is that I was not sure this is kind of a common poet complaint that people are like, will I ever write again? I had a kind of a moment of not being sure about how to continue writing. And so what I did is I read a bunch of books of prose poems that I really loved, which is sort of like, I talked about the sentence as the unit, but the prose poem is like my home genre. It's like the thing that I kind of fell in love with poetry reading. And so I was reading these books, and I was usually reading at night, and when I was like kind of struck or inspired by something, I just kind of moved to my phone to write. And so what the phone did, so it was a practice, but it was because it's sort of like faster and easier than writing by hand. So writing by hand can be really, I teach writing by hand a lot because I think it's like somatic, right? Like it just is more physical, and it changes. It has to be a little bit slower for most of us because we can type much faster than we can write by hand. And so that's a pretty different and can be really generative in terms of just kind of associating and producing the work. But this was really the phone, because I can type text on my phone faster, I could kind of get through more associations more quickly. And then I could kind of worry about them later, about how they fit together. So I really, I think now I really recommend writing on the phone, but I think it's useful for me. What was useful about it and not having started was that I had a better sense of like what it could do for me differently. Like, what does the phone let you do differently in writing a poem? Which is that you can like get to it kind of faster, right? That if you're like at the grocery store, you can like write down a line. You don't necessarily have to hold it in your head, and then you can come back to it in a way that like, even if I had a notepad with me in the grocery store and I'm like flipping it open to write it down, that's just a little bit slower, and it requires a bit more like of a shift out of whatever I'm doing. Whereas the phone, it can be closer to other things that are happening, which I think changes
not just how fast you can write, but like what kinds of language can appear. Like the threshold for, okay, I'm going to get out my notebook is a little lower if I'm already on my phone and I'm like flipping to a new tab to write something down. Than if I'm like trying to decide at what point do I switch gears to like go write something down. So I don't, yeah. So now I'm like, yeah, write on your phone, but also, know that that will kind of change a little bit, I think. I mean, that's probably not true for everyone, but for me, that it changed a little bit, like what kind of poem I was, the association that was possible in the poem and the kind of the logic, maybe, if, as one of our operative terms.
Thank you so much. I feel like somehow we have already filled our beautiful time, and
Oh my gosh.
I know, and which is shocking, but it's actually really lovely to end on this practical writing advice, about what it might mean to, if you have been writing on your phone, try writing longhand and see what kind of threshold that provides for your work, or and if you've been doing the opposite, maybe explore writing on your phone. It's made it really, it does, I understand the accessibility, right? It's right there for you, and your writing is right there for you, which is really beautiful. So I want to thank you again, Sam. And again, this
Thank
is
you,
Brook
Katie,
Corfman.
for those wonderful questions.
Yeah. I hope everyone gets a chance to get their copy of My Daily Actions or The Meteorites. Thank you.